As said, my first talk will be about augmented reality, or the first part, and the second part will then be about startups and what you can learn, or what I learned the hard way. For us, this thing here was the key element for 10 years of our company. And I do have this slide in every of my presentations, and the question is always the same. Please let me know who knows what that is. One person, two person? Phone. It's a phone, yeah. Now which phone? Which phone is that? Who knows? The first Android phone? First Android phone?
An HTC phone?
An HTC phone? That's all true. An HTC phone, yeah.
It's the first one you had the keyboard slide on.
True, true. That's a lot better than usually in my presentations or in talks I give. Normally it's like, oh, no. It's an HTC phone. It's the first Android Google produced phone. It's the HTC Dream. Here in Europe it was marketed as the T-Mobile G1. And as I say, it is the very first Android device that was publicly released. There used to be a developer edition phone, which didn't look like that. But here it ran Android 1.5, I think. So we're talking here kind of 10 years ago. And this is actually a press render, so an image that was used to promote the phone. And if you look very closely in the bottom row, you can see a palm tree icon, app icon. And with a little bit of fantasy and imagination, you can actually read Wikitude. So this is how our company started. I was not the founder. The founder also goes by the name Philipp. Seems to be special. No. But he had this idea that he wanted to visualize points of interests, iconic touristic content in the camera. And he bought that phone and he recognized that with the sensors in this phone, it was possible for the very first time to actually do that. And this was his key idea. So he wanted to show touristic content in the camera. So if you're on a scenic spot and you hold your phone and the camera is recording, he wanted to have something that tells him what his surrounding is basically. And in the kind of the lack of content, he went to Wikipedia. And Wikipedia actually has quite some content also back then on historic sites. And it happens to be that most of that content is geotagged. So if you look up the Salzburg Cathedral, you would have a geotag where this is located. And geo coordinates are usually defined by longitude, latitude, and altitude. And the very common part of all those three parts is tude. And the content came from Wikipedia, so that was how the company was named, Wikitude. As I said, this is 2008, and he tried that out and it kind of worked. So he scraped all the content from Wikipedia, which is okay, and stored that in a georeference database. And then Google was kind of, or in the mood of spending $10 million on applications for their Android ecosystem, and they had this, what they call the Android Developer Challenge. It was their way to fuel and boost the Android ecosystem. And Philipp participated with the Wikitude app and ranked then under the top 20. And with the prize money, he then started the company. So without this phone, without Google, probably this company would not exist at all. What we do now is that we produce augmented reality technology. We package that in a library and give that to developers of agencies that then use our tools to be able to create immersive experiences. That's in a nutshell what we do. So quite different from what the company used to be 10 years ago. A little bit about myself. You heard my name. I used to work for a company called 3 United, which was then out of Vienna, which was then sold to VeriSign in the US. That also kind of gave me the chance to spend 1.5 years in Boston, and then moved back to Austria, to Vienna, worked for T-Mobile Austria in marketing. So my background is engineering. I'm an alumni of this university here in telecommunication engineering, but I then kind of had an interest where decisions are made in a company, and that's usually you follow the path of the money, and then you see where kind of decisions are made. So I went to marketing and became a product manager in marketing, and then had enough of corporate and was kind of attracted by the startup world again and joined Wikitude as a developer relation manager, and then later on product manager, and then now I hold the role of CTO. As a CTO, I am responsible for the product and leading the engineering team. In our case, this is about 20 people. One of them, as that is Alex, who is organizing part of that here at the meetup. And yeah, the company at a glance, as that we're about 30 people here in Salzburg, in Spain, in Ukraine. We have attracted more than 135,000 developers worldwide who use our technology in various forms, from just trying out the tech and the library or using it commercially. We are still an independent company, so we are venture-backed. So we have 2 VCs on board since nearly 8 years now. And as you can see, 35,000 applications run with Wikitude with Wikitude tech. Overall, 1 billion installs worldwide. In a way that doesn't matter. It's a KPI that sounds cool, but and it kind of shows stability, but it doesn't matter for us from a business model perspective. So in the end, to simplify things, Wikitude is a toolbox. We produce tools. We give tools to app developers who create mobile applications for iOS, Android, and HoloLens in order for them to make augmented reality experiences a lot easier. As an Austrian, in the field of AR, I have to have the Terminator on slide. Not because I'm so much fond of killing machines, but I mean, the iconic accent is iconic, as I said. This still image is from one of his movies, I think it's Terminator 2, is in a way indicative of what the technology currently is close to be able to do. In this scene, the Terminator, so the machine, is scanning his environment, so the machine sees, and through his advanced technologies from the future, he can scan the environment, he detects the motorcycle. Not just the motorcycle, he also has kind of a semantic lookup. The machine has a semantic lookup identifying which model this is, with some additional information. So look up what the Yamaha Model 236 actually is capable of. And what's kind of interesting, the machine can see the outline, so it can very well segment kind of which object is which. And through the dashed lines, it's even indicated that the machine has an understanding of the several different motorcycles, so which of the object is occluded and which not. This is pretty close to what AR and augmented reality on mobile phones can do. As I said, not in a killing machine use case. That's not the point here. But your smartphones that you have in your pocket have more or less the power of doing this. Not necessarily fully in real time, but most of that is currently already possible. I'm not talking about AI. This is heavily computer vision related problems, segmentation of objects, finding depth from a camera image, lookup of identifying objects. Those are kind of classical computer vision problems. By a show of hands, who of you has kind of a technical background or engineering background? Oh, okay. Who of you has kind of business studies background? Okay. Others? Is there? Where?
Historian, but we're actually working in AR for part of my GA job.
Ah, okay. What was?
Communication science.
Okay. Oh, that is business for me in a way. No.
Forestry.
Ah, okay. Cool. Engineering related. That's cool. I appreciate that. As I said, I don't want to talk too much about the technology aspect of it, but of kind of the looming impact it might have on you, on your potential future businesses, and on our life as well. It's always great to have someone like Tim Cook kind of talking about the technology sector you're in. And this is a quote already, I think, nearly 2 years ago, where Tim Cook in the board calls was actually saying that he believes, or Apple believes, that AR is going to change the way we use technology forever. We're already seeing these things that will transform the way you work, play, connect, and learn. In a way that's quite interesting for me is that this is 2 years ago. Who of you has been using an AR experience in the past 3 weeks? Oh, wow. That's even more than I expected. But it's, so I don't know, like 5 persons out of this room. I think AR has not really got into mass market or into the perception of everyone, A, what it is, and B, what we can do with it. And that's, I think, kind of from a timing perspective, quite remarkable that Tim Cook has been talking about this for years, but still it's not materializing, nor kind of showing in any revenue lines, particularly for Apple. They were quite early. They acquired a company in 2014 from Munich, Metaio. 1 second. Metaio for 210 millions. At least that's what kind of we heard. And have been working on that technology for several years, and still it's not kind of showing up. Please.
Would you be able to, I'm not super familiar with augmented reality, like I have a general idea of what it is. What would be like the simplest everyday use of augmented reality, and what is like the far end, like most advanced VR right now, just for like reference?
The simplest use case, yeah. So there was Pokemon Go as kind of an AR application. So you're placing virtual content somewhere in your vicinity and kind of have a combination of virtual and real, and by that you have kind of some game experience. I find Pokemon Go a little bit problematic in terms of AR because it doesn't really interact. So the Pokemon is just overlaid over kind of the camera feed, and it's not really interacting with the reality. And I don't know, who has played Pokemon Go? I think the majority would agree that it's actually easier to play without the camera mode enabled, or the AR. It's gimmick. A useful use case that's quite simple that I find intriguing is from IKEA. The IKEA Place app, I think it's called. So IKEA has their entire catalog available as 3D models. So all the furniture is available as 3D models, and you can place that in your home in the correct size. So by that you can kind of see how this furniture would look like at home even before buying it. So you can roughly check whether it fits in terms of size, but also whether you like the look and how that kind of fits into your home. So that's the kind of a simple use case, but I think a very good one because it adds benefit. It helps you kind of your imagination. The very far side, and there you can go from a very dystopian future where we all wear contact lenses or smart glasses, and none of us is perceiving reality as it is, but his or her own reality, because everything is kind of overlaid. We interact with the world in kind of a virtual, real thing. So this is kind of the dystopian area. But I think kind of where it can go is that we'll get rid of our smartphones. I don't dare to predict kind of when that will be, but that we will primarily interact with glasses and with kind of a different screen than always kind of doing this. And we can talk about that later, whether we think this will be a use case. But if you look at kids in a bus, for example, when they go to school, they don't live in this kind of reality of the bus itself. They live in whatever they're just in there, and they live in their own reality there and kind of spaced away. So moving from this to that, I think in a way is kind of possible. Does that give a good frame?
Yeah, I just needed a reference to like what
Cool. And I'm kind of alluding to that, or coming to that anyhow, in a later way. Why do we think AR is kind of special? AR is not a technology in itself that is a use case. It's a technology that can transform quite many use cases or make them different. And this slide here is from actually 4 years ago, an analyst from the Silicon Valley called DigiCapital, who I trust and who I know is kind of producing good content. And they framed it in a way that AR and VR and MR are kind of the fourth wave of computing. So this is a little bit bigger than yet another technology that we kind of see, like AI. So the first wave was kind of the PC area, stationary bound, offline desktops. I guess most of you have not experienced that one. Then the internet area with companies like Google, Facebook coming up, PC area dominated heavily by Microsoft. Then the third wave being mobile, where we kind of saw new services coming up that the mobile device form factor actually enabled. And then the fourth wave of computing being AR and VR. The idea of this slide was also kind of to show that Apple is kind of in a very good position to dominate that fourth wave. I think that was way too early to predict. But what I would like to talk about as well is those kind of definitions that we have up there, AR, VR, MR. And there's a new one in the wild called XR, which is just ridiculous. But let me give you kind of a frame to work with that. So this is not invented by me, the virtual continuum. This is quite early, even already kind of the theory behind that is from the 80s. A guy called Paul Milgram, not from the Milgram experiment, but different person, but the same name, said, okay, we can look at that in a kind of a fluid continuum where we have two extremes, the reality, this is kind of what is, and pure virtual content, kind of what could be. This is kind of fantasy, this is how real life is. And this we usually call VR, virtual reality. We don't have another term for reality than reality. But anything in between where digital content is mixed with real-world experiences is, in a way, called mixed reality. So that's kind of the theoretic term. Microsoft did us this favor to call all their AR products mixed reality, so don't get confused, but Microsoft just wanted to use their own term, so they call it mixed reality. What is AR and what is VR? So Microsoft didn't help in that cause. So mixed reality is kind of everything where digital and real world blend in some form. And from theory perspective, if we're coming from VR and adding some reality, then we talk about augmented virtuality. That's a term no one is using. Think of it if you're wearing a VR headset and you can see your hands, that is where you then interact with something from the real world. Or if you have a cube, or if you can have a digital version of your real world environment, that would be kind of coming from that way. If we come from reality and augmenting reality, then we talk about AR. In a way, if you see on a business card, AR, VR expert or MR expert, I think that's not really right, because this part here, the mixed reality part, and the VR part share a lot of technology. They share the second letter R, but from a use case perspective, they don't share a lot. So VR, as we have it here, is beaming you or putting you in a very different world that has no relation to where you are. And that's a great use case. So Lufthansa is using VR, for example, to train their ground staff on an airport without putting them in the airport first, but training operations before they go onto the field. And that's great. It's, from a cost perspective, that's a lot better. You can do mistakes. In a way, it doesn't really matter. You don't destroy an airplane. That's cool. But in a way, this has nothing to do with where you are. Any technology that we talk about, mixed reality or AR, has something to do with you and your context you are living in. And that's why it's very, very different. And this is also why I think AR experiences will require kind of a different way of learning and how we create these experiences, because the context we live in is very different for everyone, right? as I said, we've been working in this field for 10 years, and the public response to AR and mixed reality was quite different. So the red line is mixed reality, and you can see that came up quite late. The blue one is Google Trends for the term augmented reality. And there were kind of 3 distinctive peaks so far. Who wants to guess what those 3 peaks are? Let's start with the one in April 2012.
The lens
Go ahead.
says that Google released to, I think it was.
It was called Google Glass, exactly. Google Glass, so the very first public outcry of, oh my God, we are going to wear devices that have a camera and it will monitor us all the time. That was April 2012. That was kind of peak. July 2016.
Was that Pokemon Go?
Correct. That was Pokemon Go. Also kind of the first application or AR application that made it to the masses in a way. September 2017.
The HoloLens video, release video?
No. HoloLens was 2014. At least presented and then 15 available.
Did Snapchat first?
No. But with Snapchat is also kind of in a kind of public. Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe like Apple's keynote that they're implementing AR in their like camera and everything.
Exactly. September 2017 was kind of Apple's. The keynote was in May, but the release of iOS 10, 11 with ARKit, so their technology and library to enable to bring AR to iOS devices, and that was kind of it. And then it kind of went back again, and silent. What do I think or what I want to share is also what we think is kind of one of the benefits of AR. And I'm comparing here the very same use case, or the very same application on 3 different screens. So we have desktop, remember from the eras. We have Google Maps on mobile, and kind of a screenshot of the AR version of Google Maps. And if you compare the very same service on kind of those 3 outlets, you will see that the amount of information that is presented to the user is getting less and less and less. On the desktop version, I do have quite a lot of information being presented to the user. Big screen on the map itself, many options. We kind of leave the user with whatever he or she wants. On mobile, the selection of information is already a lot sparser. It's trimmed to, I'm on the way, I have routing from A to B. Not that many options, or if there are options, they're hidden in a different menu. So the amount of information that is presented to the user is already a lot less. When looking at Google Maps for AR, this is basically just routing. This is just navigation items, some cues where you can go, no other options, no selection possibilities. It's very trimmed down to just one use case. However, the context the information is presented is getting a lot higher. On the desktop version, the application itself doesn't really know a lot about your context that you're in. It barely knows who you are. It might know where you roughly are, but it doesn't really know whether it's me, if I'm logged in, or my son who is operating the computer. We don't really know anything about you. On mobile, because the mobile phone is a very personal device, that kind of gets better. We also know the location to a better extent. We even kind of know how you're holding the phone, so if you're interacting with it, if you're on the move. So the sensoric items on the phone kind of give us that information. When thinking about wearing glasses, where the experience kind of is scanning the environment and kind of deducting cues from that and knowing very precisely where you are, what do you look at, and even kind of scanning your eyes to know very precisely what you look at, the application can react on that amount of information. It can tailor the experience to your needs a lot better. And then kind of my hypothesis is that the relevance of the information that is presented is a lot higher. So kind of reducing the amount of information, but with a higher relevance, with a higher amount of context, will lead to a bigger relevance of information. That's kind of part of the theory. It's a hypothesis I came up let's see whether it's going to be right or wrong. So if you have kind of a scientific approach to prove that, I'm happy. If you have a scientific approach to falsify that, I'm also very fine. How does kind of a practical example look like? And I hope this works. Oh. So this is one of the a demo we did last year. So we have a physical toy. On the left-hand side, you see kind of real world. On the right-hand side, you see what the application is actually doing. So we're using this photo or this image here to place the racetrack in an environment here. And then we have a remote controlled car that can kind of interact with the virtual content. So you're controlling a real world or a physical car and then interacting with the physical items. You can see the post here. So, and that was on an iPhone. So that's kind of on a very regular hardware. We did something similar also on HoloLens, but it's not in a way required. So all the information that we need is basically from the camera image and from some of the sensors that are in the iPhone available. That's all about AR. I have to share. Any questions on AR and Wikitude? So, yeah.
Why don't you think it has taken off yet? AR. Not very new. I mean,
it's not very new. That's
the concept, isn't it?
the concept is not new. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, as the company Apple acquired started 2001 with it, and theories are for that also not that far. I think it's not a trivial answer, and I think we kind of need to distinguish between why it hasn't taken off in the enterprise and why it hasn't taken off on consumer side and mass market. On enterprise, I think it's actually going quite well there. Part of the problem is the capable devices. So the smartphone itself is kind of capable in a way, kind of from what it brings, but it's not very practical. I personally find consuming AR experiences like that not really practical. That's kind of annoying, right? You want to have your hands free and you want to interact with that, like that. That's not cool. On the other hand, HMDs, head-mounted displays, are still quite bulky. I don't know if you've seen HoloLens 2 or if you had the chance to wear it. That is still quite massive. The Snapchat spectacles, which are more or less just a camera and a display, and they don't interact with the world. They're quite slim. So I think that's part of the problem that will be resolved by miniaturization somewhen. The key problem there still is optics and lenses, and it's still very hard to create very small lenses with a wide field of view and a good color contrast. So hardware is one problem. I think the transition from mobile to AR is not as smooth as from kind of internet to mobile. Internet to mobile, it was, yes, we have a new device, a device factor, but the services were very similar. Yeah, you had new capabilities, but if you look kind of, if you take Facebook as an example, Facebook Internet and Facebook Mobile, in a way, have very similar capabilities. Yeah, you can post from everywhere, and that's kind of the benefit there, but that transition, that kind of smooth transition, won't happen from mobile to AR. And I believe because you're working kind of with contextual information, that's a lot harder to grasp and work with. So it's kind of content, it's kind of hardware. I don't think it's kind of money related. There is quite some amount of investment in the space, but I think those kind of are the key things at the moment. You were, go ahead.
Yeah, so I kind of stuck a little bit with the relevance part. It's kind of a question because, I mean, when I use my desktop, I get a lot of spam. For example, I use a free antivirus filter. So do you see a danger of kind of these augmented spam, so to say?
Absolutely. I think this is also one of the very tricky challenges to identify what I want to consume at the moment. So if you look up AR and kind of popular videos there from artists, you will come up with a kind of dystopian version of AR where someone is wearing glasses and literally every surface in his kitchen is kind of plastered with advertisement. I don't believe in that because I think we will control what we want to consume. So I think we will take an active decision in whether I want now some touristic content or whether I want now some public transport information. I think the human still will kind of decide what's going to be shown. I don't believe in kind of this, I'm wearing glasses and I will see kind of everything. Because that will kind of just overload us. That's anyhow kind of overload of information is anyhow kind of an issue, or will be an issue. And you see that also in Google Glass, the amount of information that you can show is very, very limited.
How much of a coding background would you recommend if somebody wanted to use a platform like Wikitude and Unity?
I still think that we're not yet in the time that you can do a lot without a lot of coding. So I think you should have some idea. Part of it is coding. Part of it is kind of an understanding of 3D and space and working with space, and that is also fairly novel. While we have that kind of being developed for games and gaming purposes, that kind of notion how I'm doing a business logic in 3D is quite novel. So kind of being able to create 3D models, work with 3D models, and that is also, I think, required.
And then follow-up question, do you
Sure.
guys do special programs at universities or?
So I happen to do one of the courses here, mixed reality. Other than that, we have a few tutorials, I think, right? Yeah, we do have a few tutorials up online. Yeah, that's roughly it.
How do you involve the user, the end user, when designing these kind of VR, AR experiences?
Very good question. As Wikitude, we create a product that then developers will use to create the AR experiences. So we rarely are involved in kind of creating the actual experience. We give the tools to them, and so it's most of the time the role or the responsibility of the agency to then take their users and create that. We're quite broad SDK, so we've not kind of narrowed it down that our SDK is suitable for just this use case, remote maintenance or whatever. So we keep it quite broad. We just try to kind of predict what users want to use and what kind of we can offer. So it's always kind of a mixture between asking customers what they need and kind of coming up with own ideas and mixing that into a product. That's kind of our role.
Can you just take a step back and not me? I'm still stuck at how does this work? For Google Glasses or something like that, how does the technology scan your eyes? Would it do it the same way it would scan the screen when you're on maps?
So Google Glass is probably not the best example. Google Glass is a very simple device. Basically, it's a camera that has a display, and that's kind of it. It's not scanning anything kind of from the surrounding. Neither does it do your eyes. If you think of HoloLens, which is a variable computer more or less, battery pack, 2 lenses, 6 cameras, 4 of them tracking cameras, a depth camera and a regular camera, that's kind of a different sort of beast. It also has infrared cameras that point towards your eyes, and with that, it's kind of scanning where you look at. Because HoloLens kind of knows where the position of those is. It very well then kind of knows what you look at. That is one thing. The other thing is kind of a spatial mapping algorithm. So the tracking cameras that are black and white cameras, they scan the surrounding, and the algorithm kind of tries to understand how the surrounding kind of looks like. And think of that as kind of a very coarse mesh of geometry of kind of how this looks like. Don't think of kind of it would be able to model that chair, for example. It would just roughly detect there is something, there's nothing, there is something again. That's about the level of detail you get at the moment. And then there are kind of additional algorithms that would try to identify which objects are there. That is kind of more like in the area of AI, that it would then say, okay, I see people, I see faces, there are chairs, floor. That's kind of how it works, roughly. Okay.
Will there, on the transition towards VR and AR technologies becoming dominant, will there be any groups of people or businesses you think that don't benefit but are instead put in like tough situations?
That's a very good question. You want to answer? Or? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm also working in
Yeah.
so I think maybe something you can think of is like the US Army actually ordered 100,000 HoloLenses. So they're using AR actually to just train them. My images of field time never do that, I don't think much about it. But that could give them an advantage over others. So that's where something you think like, is that FP responsible as even as a tech company to do something like that?
From a business perspective, I kind of see two trends in very high level. One is companies that will embrace digitalization, digital tools, and kind of work with that. And AR is kind of one evolution of that, right? I can display showed data that is somewhere on a screen at the moment, and I can put that into the real world, and by that kind of make it easier to work with it. So I think this is kind of one stream. And I think the other stream is staying purely offline and kind of, getting the experience, all this kind of digital noise and waste that we kind of have, go away with that and just have kind of a very pure experience. And I think that will still grow and be very important. So forestry and kind of, you shouldn't be afraid of your future, I think. So Alex is telling me, guys, we should go to the kind of second chapter. It's kind of thoughts on startup, and it's kind of a little bit less structured than before. Martin, the CEO of the company, and myself, we kind of put that out in a Medium article last year for the 10th anniversary of Wikitude, and kind of our learnings in kind of working in a startup-like company. Who happens to have a definition of a startup? What is a startup?
Don't know if that's the definition, but when I hear startup, I think a company that is either disrupting an existing market or creating, or is the start of a new market. So creating their own thing.
I can tell you there is no official definition. So there is no right or wrong.
Company that doesn't make money.
Yeah? Anyway, that's true.
Like then it becomes like a real
Right. Normally, kind of the most, or the two items that kind of define what we currently perceive as startup is A, it's kind of in a innovation field or a field of high innovative areas, and B, it has kind of a very high growth potential. So, if you open up a hairstylist studio or hair studio, that is in a way also a startup, but kind of the growth potential is limited. You can do so many people. That's kind of normally how we refer to startups. And what tends to be part of that is also that some venture capitalists or risk money is kind of involved. Who of you thinks she will end up in a startup or even find a startup? Oh, wow, cool. So 75 to 90% tend to fail. So this is the 75% come from a Harvard study, the other number I found, as we don't have a very clear definition of startup, that's kind of, it's quite a range. But that should not kind of shock you or us. That's kind of part of the game, right? Failing and failing often is part of the game. If you look in Silicon Valley, if you have founders who failed twice or who kind of went bankrupt, that is actually perceived as a good thing. It is part of experience.
By failed, do you mean like, because I know a lot of startups would be picked up by big companies. Would you consider that a success or?
Success.
Okay.
Success. That's success. If you're acquired and it's not kind of a fire sale, that tends to be success. But I'll come to that very specific point from my kind of personal perspective. If you look at kind of why startups fail, again, two different studies. Let's look on the right-hand side first. No market need, ran out of cash, yeah. Not the right team, got outcompeted, which I think is rather lower. Pricing cost issue, which is directly related to ran out of cash. Poor product, lack of business model, poor marketing, and ignore customers. How many of those reasons are kind of technically based on poor technology or a bad idea? Poor product, maybe, but the rest is pretty much business, leadership, and common sense. And in a way, the left-hand side is even more on that. Lack of focus, lack of motivation, commitment, and passion, too much pride, resulting in an unwillingness to see or listen. That one I find very interesting. Taking advice from the wrong people, okay, that can happen. Lacking good mentorship, lack of general and domain-specific business knowledge, and raising too much money too soon. That is indeed a problem, and I can tell you, and kind of an interesting example here for the very last point. Back 2010, when Wikitude was founded, there was another company called Lear, a Dutch company, with the very same idea of showing content around. They raised, within 1 year, $14 million, $10 million from Intel, the rest from other VCs, and started to burn that like hell. This company doesn't exist anymore. While both companies had very similar idea and very similar starting point, our funding history was a lot slower and kind of a lot more organic, while kind of the 14 million they had forced them to spend that and kind of go very fast and spend that also very fast, which made them come to a point where they couldn't return and then kind of closed doors. I don't know kind of what is better and what is. I try not to judge that. It's just one different way of kind of how you operate a company and how you go about this. You know, if you have an idea and you want to pursue that and you kind of want to go fast and you want to spend all the money on that and kind of risk that, that's one way to go. That's very fine and kind of fail fast. We took a very different way. We kind of were forced to spend money more wisely and kind of grow in a very different speed. Those 10 learnings are kind of reflected in that, and they kind of were independent. Avoid distraction is pretty much like lack of focus. As a startup, your benefit is that you can focus, and you have to focus on a very specific idea. At Wikitude, 2012, we had a product that was called Wikitude Drive, which was a car navigation tool that showed the way directly in the phone. So you put your phone in the windshield, and it would show the turns in your navigation system in the camera view. Very cool product, cool use of AR, but we abandoned the product quite soon because the benefit for the user was not AR. AR was like 5% of the story. The rest was regular turn-by-turn navigation. And we saw that we are not a turn-by-turn navigation company. Navtech is, TomTom is. They're experts in that. We are experts in AR. So we said, okay, we don't do this product. We don't market that and bring that kind of to a level that we are masters in turn-by-turn navigation, but that we are masters in AR. The benefit you have as a startup compared to a corporate is that you can go fast. Corporates can't. Once they kind of go in a direction, they do it with full force, and they can scale, and they have a lot of kind of more power and more financial power, but what they rarely can do is go fast and try out things. That's kind of the benefit of a startup. Be close to the market. I think that's kind of common sense. If you don't listen to your customer, they will not buy it. If you think you have the greatest idea and it's the coolest product, that's cool, but it makes you the buyer. And if you don't find another one who buys your product, that's kind of it, right? You need to listen to others, what they really want. And you might have the best idea, and you think it's the greatest idea, in a way, could not matter. If you don't find someone who buys it, it will be just a very good idea. It will not be a successful product. Set realistic goals. That comes kind of from the mid area of our company. A startup or a company goes through very different phases. In the beginning, you have 2, 3 people, 4 people, the founders, who are highly intrinsically motivated, who kind of like what they do. They will likely spend a lot of minutes on a lot of hours on the work. And then you come to a point where you need to scale. You need to hire people. And then you will, after a few years, that what you started early on, where you did a lot of technology compromises, will not be sufficient anymore. You need to reinvent. So there will be some times that you need to define quite clearly what you want to achieve. Otherwise, it will kind of go beyond. That is very specific for us. Learn to run marathons, I think, and not only kind of sprinting. I think this is very specific to Wikitude. In the Silicon Valley, I would see that very differently. They rather prefer companies that can go quickly, and after 18 months, 24 months, they are kind of off to sold to a bigger company. Make clear decisions. Again, that's kind of common sense. Select the right partners. That is very true also in combination with the team. And here, that was also the purpose why I was asking who is engineering background, who is business background. You need different personalities and skills in a company. Quite often in the tech sector, you have 3, 4 very heavily tech-oriented, predominantly male people sitting there creating an idea, creating a product, but are in no way able to sell it. And selling is an art. I had to learn it on my own. That's not what kind of a lot of people are given. You can learn how to sell, and you can learn how to present your product. Tech-oriented programs usually don't go in that direction. If you find a startup, my advice is learn how to sell. Trust is a huge issue. No, a big portion of it. Also trust in terms of who your VC is. So if you find an investor, trusting this investor, being able to work with him or her in a normal manner is way more important than $100,000 more on your bank account. Money is important, but particularly in the beginning, mentorship and a trust relationship with your investor is super important. And this can go very, very wrong quite quickly. And kind of my last advice for particularly tech startups, if you are in the digital area and you're kind of planning going there, make sure you understand the ramifications of intellectual property, of patents quite early on. Patents will help you get a better evaluation of your company, will make it possible to protect your company, and you need to understand that very, very early on.
So a lot of us are mixed engineering backgrounds, some like software, some mechanical. I myself am a mechanical engineer. But working with software, the patent and IP landscape, it seemed like completely different. Do you talk with specifically software patent attorneys to get information about that sort of stuff, or?
Yes, normally you find one, kind of everywhere. You're from the US, or?
Yeah, New York.
Yeah, yeah. There are several in that field. The situation is a little bit different from US and Europe. Europe tends to be a little bit stricter when it comes to software patents, but the general rule is if you have a software that kind of mimics some sort of process, that you could say, I can put that also kind of in a mechanical process, then this is patentable. You cannot patent a program itself, so you could not patent Microsoft Word as such, but if you have this functionality algorithm that does something special, you can patent that. And that's super important. I think it's overlooked quite often, but it will help you in so many ways. I think time-wise we're fine. Okay. So let me see. Where do we have that? Choose the right team, probably. Yeah. One of the things that helped me in the beginning, and that I see also from fellows who founded companies, is that in the beginning you don't know kind of what's not possible. So you have kind of a very natural naivety to approach certain things, and that's very good. Keep that for the beginning, right? Common sense will come in and kick in, and you'll get a lot of rules afterwards, but approaching things and not knowing all the things that don't work is actually a very good thing. And that tends to get harder later on. And choosing the right team, I think, is the key element of it. You will spend most of your time with those persons. And if you see early on that from a personality perspective, there are issues, you need to act. We tend to do our hiring process quite diligently. So we look not only for skill set, but also whether this person matches our kind of personality profile, and if we think we can work with this person, and vice versa. Otherwise, you get into troubles. And kind of that as the last slide. Also, a thank you to the team, also to Alex, who has been working for some time for us. Please.